Alright, so today we're stepping it up a notch. My son's outgrown the cheap Walmart nightstands, and honestly, I think it's time that we level up too. This build is all about taking those beginner woodworking skills and stretching them a bit further. New tools, a few more advanced techniques, and honestly, a whole lot of fun. Now before you start thinking that this is out of your league, let me stop you right there. If you can get your hands on some decently straight 4x4s and 2x4s, you're good to go. Poplar was just my choice because it's easy to work with, it paints beautifully, and well, it's easy on the wallet. Now I prefer working with rough cut lumber because I enjoy the milling process. But if you don't have a joiner or a planer, don't sweat it. I've got a great hack to get you there, so stick around. This build is completely approachable, and I'll be here to walk you through every step of the way. So grab your tools, sweep out that workshop, and let's make something you can be proud of together. Let's get started. And these are all of the individual components for one nightstand. So we're going to have 4 of the legs. We're going to have the front, top, and bottom rails, 2 of those. We're going to have 2 of the rear top and bottom rails. We're going to have 2 of the bottom left and right rails and 2 of the top left and right rails. So I know not everybody has the ability to use a joiner, use a planer. When I was first starting out, I actually used a little 6-inch joiner, on so many projects. Before I actually got a big 8-inch joiner. And I had one of those lunchbox planers for the longest time. But I wanted to show you that although I do prefer to mill my own lumber, you can get this project completed by utilizing construction grade lumber for the legs. These are 4x4s, and you can get that 2x2 piece that we need cut out of these without the use of a joiner or a planer. I'm gonna go ahead and just make one set of legs utilizing this method, just to show you guys that you don't need all of those fancy tools to complete these type of projects. Anyway, show you some tricks to get everything kind of squared up, and then we'll continue. So when I do this, usually I'll take a little 2-foot level and I'll use this as my straight edge up against my fence. And what we're going to do is go ahead and use that as a reference to basically flatten this side of the 4x4. You'll want to slide the level at the same time that you're running the board through. In this way, it's referencing your fence, it's referencing the level, and it's keeping the board itself flush as you run it through your saw blade. And we'll set this, up against the blade. I'll bring it in probably about 3/16. Go ahead and get a good solid straight edge on this side. Then we'll turn it, we'll do it on the bottom side as well. So we'll have a full flat 90 degree, and then we'll cut our parts. Okay, first up are the legs. These legs are part of our 2-inch by 2-inch stock. Final dimensions will be 23 1/4 inch long. We're gonna have a 1/2-inch by 1/2-inch dado in 2 locations for the top shelf and the bottom shelf. That top dado is 7.5 inches from the top to the top of that top dado. And then it's 20 1/4 inches to get to the bottom dado, but it's from the top of that dado to the top of that leg is 20 1/4. We're gonna taper this leg. So we're gonna measure up 2 inches from the bottom of the leg up, and then from the outside of the leg in, we're gonna measure 1 3/16 to get this taper. And we're gonna end this by putting a 1/4 inch chamfer along the entirety of this leg, and that's merely for aesthetics. With our crosscut sled, we cut our legs to final dimensions, ensuring that the ends are square.
Use stop blocks whenever possible to help with repeatability, or in this instance, your table saw fence. Also, it's a good idea to always label your pieces to help maintain the correct orientation. This helps to reduce mistakes. Just take my word for it. Next, we mark up the correct measurements for the taper, 2 inches from the bottom and 1 3/16 inches from the side, and then make the cuts on the table saw using the miter gauge. Again, stop blocks for repeatability. Switching over to my 6-inch dado stack, we cut the upper 1/2 inch dado, then the lower 1/2 inch dado. And finally, we set our blade to 45 degrees and cut the chamfer along the leg. And with that, our legs are done.
Okay, now that we have our legs finished, we're gonna move forward to the front top and bottom rails. Now these are pretty straightforward. It's simply just 1.5 inches by 1 3/4 by 15 inch. Now, again, if you did not mill your own lumber, the good news is you can just use a 2x4. It's already 1.5 inches. I got this at the box store and I picked out the straightest pieces that I could. I actually used some select lumber. And so all we have to do now is set the straight edge on this, very similar to the way that we did it for the legs. And then we'll cut these down to size. Here, I'll show you how. All right, we're gonna add a little bit more complexity to this. Now we're going to do the back of the cabinet top and bottom rails. For this, it's just a little bit more involved. All we have to do is take a 15-inch piece of our 1 3/4 by 1.5 inches that we've cut. We're gonna go in 1/2 of an inch, and then we're gonna come up 1 1/4. And while you're making the rear top and bottom, go ahead and grab your 11-inch pieces because guess what? They're cut exactly the same. So these are the top left and right rails of the cabinet, and since the measurements are the same, run all of those pieces at the same time so that you can utilize the settings of your table saw each and every time. All right, we're almost finished, guys. All we have left is the bottom left and right rails. Now, these are a little different and a little tricky. This is gonna utilize some of the leftover 2x2 stock that we cut out of the 4x4s earlier, because this one actually measures 2 inch by 1 3/4. On one side, we're going to put a 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch dado, and then on the other side, we're going to put a 1/2 inch by 1 1/4. So this looks complex, but I guarantee you, it's nothing that we can't handle. For the joinery, we're going to use a couple of different methods since not everybody actually has a domino. Use screws, but we're going to recess those within a hole that we will fill with a dowel rod. And so on our front and rear legs, as far as the facing side of those, and it's real simple, it's just 7/8 in, 1/2 inch down from the top. And then on the bottom, you're actually going to come up 3.5 inches and come in 7/8. We drill about 1.5 inches down in order to get our depth. And then for the side rails, top and bottom, we're going to use dominoes for that. And we went ahead and made our marks for our dominoes. Once you have it set up, it's just 3/4 of an inch, since the size of the rails is actually 1.5 inches. Oh, that one's smooth. All right, we made our markings on the front and back panels. I'm gonna use dominoes here so you can see for the bottom as well as the top. We're gonna come in 3/4 of an inch because this is 1/2 of an inch material. So 3/4 of an inch to actually make our lines here. And then we'll shoot our dominoes.
I built a jig to help with alignment and used my drill press to drill the locations for the screws. With a 1/2 inch Forstner bit, I drilled to a depth of about 1.5 inches. You can also just use a drill guide here, or for those brave woodworkers that love to live on the edge, your handheld drill. My son asked to jump in and take over, and with the jig set up, he sailed through the rest of the legs pretty quickly. And I have to admit, I absolutely love it when my kids want to jump in. As a dad and a woodworker, there's no better feeling in the world. Moving on to the dominoes, I began by cutting the locations for my loose tenons. I'm using 4mm dominoes. On the rails themselves, I set the domino to the tight setting to lock in my tenon. However, for the legs, I switched to the middle setting to allow for micro adjusting during the glue up. My upper tenon is set at a depth of 16 and my lower tenon a depth of 36. Now, before some viewers go losing their minds about utilizing dominoes on this project, first, you can attach the front and back rails using screws like we did for the sides. However, later in the video, I'll be reinforcing the joints with some L brackets. So actually, you can use butt joints for the entire glue up and reinforce them later with L brackets. My intention of showing all these different methods was to demonstrate that in woodworking, there are usually multiple approaches to tackling joinery, and a project such as this allows you to practice multiple methods of your choice. Now, if you're still with me, I just want to take a moment to say thank you for sticking around. If you've enjoyed the video and picked up a few tips along the way, it would really mean a lot if you'd hit that like button and consider subscribing. Your support helps me keep creating content like this and growing the channel. Assembly can be a tedious process, but taking your time and staying patient will pay off. At one point, I even had to break out my trusty chin clamp. Remember, this isn't a race. It's all about precision. I start by using the clamp with light pressure to loosely hold the rail into place, then make small adjustments as needed. Once the rail is perfectly aligned in position, I tighten the clamp securely. From there, it's just a matter of moving around the nightstand and attaching the remaining rails. Before screwing everything together, I always take a moment to double check everything with my carpenter square, using it as an opportunity to make any final adjustments. Next, we pre-drill the screw locations. My Forstner bit creates a small indentation in the center of each hole, making alignment a breeze. After that, it's just a matter of screwing everything together. I know, big shocker, right? Now, earlier in the video, I mentioned using L brackets. If you're using dominoes for all the rails, you don't really need them. But if you went with screws or even butt joints, they're a great way to add extra strength and prevent the rails from pivoting. They're small and stay completely hidden, so they don't affect the look of the finished piece, and they're super simple and quick to install.
Whew, nice cool morning. It's about 40 degrees right now. It's supposed to get up to about 55, so it's going to be a great day to work in the workshop. We have finished the carcass, and so we'll start cutting our panels. We're using 1/2" MDF, so we'll do the left, the right, the rear panels, as well as the top and the bottom shelves. And also at this point, no matter how good I think I am, I'm just going to do referential measurements. So we'll measure the openings and get those cut to the correct size, and we'll get them installed. Let's get started. So if you remember when we were cutting the rails, we put in our dados and the panels fit nice and tight right into those rabbets, both on the front as well as the rear.
Now, even though I triple checked the cabinet multiple times to make sure it was square, sliding the panels in is always a little intimidating, but wouldn't you know it, they slid right in. Except for the back panel, little stubborn son of a I had to break out Mr. Persuasion to get it to cooperate. But eventually we got it. Yippee! Like a glove. For the shelves, my son used a router table to put a 3/8 round over on both sides. We did this on the front edge of the middle shelf and both the front and back edges of the bottom shelf. No worries if you don't have a router table, just use your trim router. Now the moment of truth.
Yippee! So this is that bottom dado here that goes into the rabbet, 1/2" by 1/2" rabbet on that bottom leg. And that is where we will slide our bottom shelf. ahead.
This felt like the perfect time to tackle the drawer faces. I was aiming for an 1/8 inch reveal, making them 10.5 by 14 3/4. Also, instead of traditional floating panels, I went poor man style. I milled down some poplar to a thickness of 3/8, ripped 1.5 inch slats on the table saw, and cut them to size on the crosscut sled. Alternatively, you can use the 2x4 offcuts from when we made the legs. They're already 1.5 inch wide, so they're a great option. Now initially, my SketchUp model had 2 drawers, but after some discussion with my boys, we agreed that one larger drawer made more sense. Ultimately, it's up to you. Whatever suits your needs best. There's no right or wrong choice. Now from here, it's just a matter of working your way around the drawer face, one side at a time. I'm attaching them with 18 gauge brad nails. Later, I'll come back and fill the nail holes with wood filler. Since we're painting the nightstands, the holes will be completely hidden. Finally, I used my $10 cabinet hardware jig to mark the location for my drawer pulls. As the day wrapped up, I took some time to rough cut the wood for the nightstand tops and break down the plywood we'll be using for the drawer boxes. This next step may not be for everyone, but I wasn't a fan of the hard edge transition on the panel. So off camera, I made some trim by running 1/2 inch MDF through my router with a roundover bit. Now installing the trim was pretty straightforward. I used my miter saw to cut 45-degree angles as I worked my way around the nightstand. I always measure a little long and then sneak up on the final length. Sure, it means a few extra trips back and forth to the miter saw, but it's worth it for a nice tight fit. To attach the trim, I used my 18 gauge brad nailer. I had to cut down some 1/2 inch dowels to plug the holes we drilled in the legs. To make things easier, I put a slight taper on one end using a sander. It really helps when starting the dowels. After that, I just add a little glue and then drive them home. Now for some transparency about a design flaw. If I could go back, I wouldn't use a full through dado on the back leg for the middle shelf. I completely missed that detail when designing it in SketchUp. To fix it, I had to cut a 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch MDF plug, then cut everything flush using my flush cut saw. Now once the nightstands are sanded, primed, and painted, I'm hoping that it won't be too noticeable. Plus it's on the back, so that's a bonus. I'm using 1/2 inch Baltic birch for the drawer boxes. Since I already ripped them down with my track saw, I used my table saw to cut them to their final height of 7.5. Now for the width, I subtracted 1 inch to account for the side mounted drawer slides, which brought them to 13 3/4. As far as the depth, I just kept it simple and went 12 inches. For the drawer bottoms, I'm just using 1/4 inch Baltic birch. For drawers, I like to batch them out. This way, I only have to set my cuts up once and then run all the pieces through. I grabbed my 1/4 inch setup block to set the blade height for cutting the dados for the drawer bottoms. Then, I set my table saw fence to 1/4 inch and run all the drawers through. Since the drawer bottoms are 1/4 inch thick, and my saw blade is only 1/8 inch, I adjust the blade outward and run them through again. I almost never nail it on the first try. And of course, this time was no different. But we eventually got there. With our final width set, all we have to do now is just rerun the drawers. I went with pocket holes for the drawer boxes since my son was eager to jump back in. So after marking the hole locations, I let him take it from there. He drilled 6 pocket holes on the front and back panel of each drawer box. When he was finished, I tackled the sanding. Have I mentioned that I hate sanding? But for me, it's always easier to handle the sanding before assembling the drawer boxes. I still remember when I first discovered pocket holes. Man, I felt unstoppable. It's such a simple tool that just works. Now, honestly, I'm not sure if my approach is the YouTube-approved method, but when I'm using pocket holes, I clamp each location individually. Pocket holes have a way of shifting when you're driving the screws, so this helps keep movement to a minimum if there's any at all. But once again, it's just about taking your time and working your way through each row of pocket holes. Now, I'd love to know your thoughts on pocket holes. Drop a comment of when you think it is or isn't appropriate to use them.
All right, so from a build perspective, the cabinets are pretty much complete now. We also took an opportunity to build the drawer boxes as well as the drawer faces. So this thing's ready to be sanded, and I won't show you a sanding montage. Sanding is the absolute worst, but we are at a point where we can go ahead and make the tops. It's not going to be painted, it's actually going to be stained. So I picked up some ash from my hardwood store, and I like using ash as an alternate to like white oak. It's cheaper, it's just as hard, but you can definitely get this to be stained and look really, really good. So I'm going to use ash. I'm going to mill this up, and I will also not make you watch a milling montage, even though for some reason, like, I like milling montages. They just, make me feel good when I watch lumber get milled up. But for the 5 people that are going to watch this video, I will not put you through that misery. So through the magic of YouTube, next time you see this will be milled down to 3/4 of an inch. Also, three-dimensional lumber is available at most of the box stores. So you can also just buy 3/4 inch dimensional lumber, do the tabletops. So we'll get these milled, paneled up, and then we'll get them installed on the cabinet.
Now with my ash milled, yes, I said ash, not Anyway, with the boards milled to 3/4 thick and cut to width, it was time to start the glue up. Now personally, I like to mix up the board widths for my tops. I know this style isn't for everyone, but I think it gives a piece a more organic look. What about you? Drop a comment below. Do you prefer varying board sizes, or do you like them uniform? Now overall, the glue up went smoothly, except for one of the tops. One of the boards developed a slight bow even after milling, so I had to bring out a set of claws to keep everything flat. How satisfying is scraping the glue? I mean, seriously, can it get any better? Back at the crosscut sled, I square up one end of the top, then cut it to its final dimensions of 16 by 20 inches. To tie in with the chamfer detail on the legs, I grabbed a 1/4 inch chamfer bit and ran all the bottom edges of my top through the router table. And then, yep, you guessed it, sanding. Honestly, it wasn't as bad as sanding the nightstands themselves. Those were a nightmare. Get it? Anyway, I started at 80 grit, then worked my way up to 120, 180, and then finally 220. As a woodworker, I've always stuck to using a brush when painting, but this has led me to shy away from projects that require a lot of paintwork. Recently, I decided to try out the Ehrlich's 5700 to see if there's an alternative that could give me a professional finish, has a quick learning curve, and doesn't break the bank. Now I'm planning on a separate video where I deep dive into this HVLP sprayer, covering both the pros and cons. I'll also be going through my entire painting process for these nightstands to show you what it takes to get a smooth, professional finish. So make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the full breakdown when it's uploaded. Staining wood, honestly, it just feels a little unnatural to me. But hey, it's the color my son picked out. It's English chestnut, in case you're wondering. My other son, he went with ash gray from Rubio Monocoat. Yep, that's a whole different saga for another day. For the drawer boxes, I always do 2 coats of natural Danish oil by Watco. It's never let me down. It just takes forever to dry. Now for the tops, I went with a water-based polyurethane to protect them because, let's be real, I know my boys won't be treating these like delicate flowers. Who knows what kind of battle scars they're going to rack up over time. I put on 5 coats, sanding with 320 grit between each coat. Fingers crossed it holds up, but I know they're still going to find a way to mess it up. I grabbed a scrap piece of MDF and made some quick spacers to help me get the drawer slides lined up just right, both for the height and to account for the flush-mounted drawer faces. Then I used a scrap piece of 1/2 inch MDF to lift the drawer boxes off the bottom, sliding them all the way in. Once they're in, pull the drawers out just a little at a time and work your way down the drawer slide rails, making sure everything stays nice and aligned. A few years back, I picked up a pack of these handy shims, and let me tell you, they've more than earned a spot in my shop. For this project, I used an 1/8 inch shim to evenly space the drawer face. Once the drawer face is perfectly centered, I grabbed a 3/32 bit and pre-drilled the holes for the drawer pulls. Now at this point, I don't install the pulls yet. Instead, I use drywall screws to temporarily attach the drawer face to the drawer box. Now with the drawer out of the nightstand, I secure the face permanently by driving in 4 screws from the back of the drawer box. nice and solid. Then I slide the drawer back into place, remove the temporary drywall screws, and drill the final holes for the pulls with a 3/16 bit. Now once that's done, it's time to install the drawer pulls. The style is totally up to you, so pick something that speaks to that piece, or maybe your budget, and of course, after everything's put together, you have to perform the mandatory slide test. Not just once, but at least twice, because, it's a rule. Alright, here we are, the final step. It's funny, attaching the top of the nightstand might seem like the most straightforward part of this whole build, but there are so many ways to do it. I could probably make a separate video just walking through all the fasteners and techniques, but don't worry, I won't. For this one though, I decided to keep it simple. I'm using the same L brackets I used earlier. Why, you may be asking? Well, because they work. And yeah, as it relates to wood movement, I hear ya. However, these tops are sealed with 5 coats of poly, front, back, and all 4 edges. And in the kind of homes most of us live in today, where the temperature and humidity barely fluctuate, I'm confident any movement will be minimal. So here's how we'll wrap it up. Flip the nightstands over, center it on the top with a 1/2 inch overhang on all 4 sides, and drive the screws into those brackets. And with that, we're finished.